Alright guys, today we're working on the Seadoo GTI again. I thought we had it running, but apparently it's still not running just from cleaning the carburetors. So we're going to do a full fuel system flush on this thing, fix everything in the fuel system. I looked on YouTube and there's really not much on doing that, but it's a really common problem on these Seadoos that they have the green goo in the fuel system. So today we're going to go through this entire fuel system and I'm going to show you how to replace everything. And all the products I use will be down in the description. Alright, for this rebuild we're going to need 25 feet of automotive fuel line. And then a new fuel filter here. These things get pretty dirty over time, and then there's an O-ring that goes with it. These O-rings tend to go out and let air into the fuel system, so that's a common problem for not getting enough fuel. And then we got two mikuni carburetor rebuild kits here for rebuilding the carburetor with genuine OEM parts. And then we got our fuel selector valve, which gets really corroded and gummed up over time, so you're definitely going to want to replace this. The old one has a lot of corrosion on it, as I'll show you later on. And then to crimp these fuel lines down, we got two types of clamps here. We just got our standard, tighten them down with a wrench, and then we have zip ties for the tighter spaces that are harder to get to. I'm going to start with this fuel selector valve here, and the first thing I'm going to do is take the hoses off from the underside, because this will just allow it to drop out when I'm ready and be easier to remove. So I'm going to label those hoses so I know which one goes where when it's time to put them onto this new one. It's a little hard to see here, but I labeled our reserve hose, our out hose, and our main hose on the left here. Okay, so these three hoses go into the fuel selector valve here, and unfortunately it's really hard to get to because we have this plate here for the steering. But I'm just gonna, I already pulled this one out, and I'm just gonna yank each of these hoses off since I can't get to the clamps. Just gonna have to pull on them pretty hard to get them out. When I go to install the new fuel selector valve, I'm gonna remove this bracket just to get it out of the way because it was really hard to reach back up in there. And both of these bolts were 14 millimeters. Normally there's gonna be a little screw in here that you're gonna be able to take off. Ours didn't have that. It was full of like this glue substance. So I'm just gonna wedge it with a screwdriver. Just be careful because this one went flying across the shop. Alright, using a 1 3/16 socket, I'm going to take this nut off. And there's two rubber kind of washers that go around it, and I can just pop out the fuel selector. There's the old nasty one. It's got the green goo down in it. So definitely was time to replace this guy. Now we're ready to install our new fuel selector. And there's a little notch on it right here. It's going to want to line up with that notch there. Okay, now we can just push it through and then install our rubber washers one at a time here. And then we're ready to reinstall that nut. We're going to go ahead and tighten down this plastic nut here using a 30mm socket, or you can use 1 3/16, so the same. And hold it with your other hand so it doesn't twist on you, and also don't get it too tight because they are plastic threads. Now we're just going to go ahead and pop on our fuel selector cap. Alright, now that we did that fuel selector valve, the next step is going to be taking out the three hoses we labeled. I'm going to start with the main gas line here and just pull it out from, fits onto this nozzle here, and now I'm going to take it out. Okay, now we're going to measure up the line here, and it doesn't have to be a perfect measurement, just get somewhere general in the area of the length. because all of these have a little bit too much length to them. And then go ahead and cut it with some dikes. And as far as clamps, you can use, I'm not going to use those because there's not enough space, and these Seadoo ones are tough to work with, so I never really reuse these because they're a pain. So for this, I'm going to use zip ties since it's hard to get to, and I like to install them beforehand. And I know you guys are probably thinking zip ties won't hold up that well, but actually I've been really surprised. They do a really good job, and they're a lot easier to work with than the other style clamps. Alright, now we can start to toss this new fuel line on there. I'm just going to put it on there and not cinch the zip tie up just yet. I'm going to wait till I get the other lines on there to do that. Okay, now we're going to work with our fuel filter here. We already removed the nut from the top off camera, and then we're going to pull this guy out. Alright, and now we're going to remove these two hoses from the filter, and then I'm going to take it over to the workbench to put the new filter in. Also, this output hose that we already took off of the fuel selector will come off, so we're going to go get a new hose for that. Just got to unscrew the cap for this guy. Fuel's going to come out, so have a rag ready. I'm going to go dump this fuel into my fuel spare tank. Just going to remove this filter. Now we're going to take out the old O-ring and pop in the new one. Like I said earlier, these O-rings tend to go out and let air into the fuel system, so it's never a bad idea to replace them. Same way as before, we just measured our hose and now we're cutting it, and then we're going to install the zip ties. I don't like to install them too tight because then you won't be able to fit them over the connector, but you also want them snug enough so they don't fall off. Okay, now we're back over at the Seadoo, and I'm installing our output line from the fuel selector into the fuel filter, and I'm going to cinch down the zip tie. Alright, now we have this hose on the filter, so the other hose that went to the filter I labeled F, and it goes down to the carbs over here, so we're going to head to the carbs. Alright, we just took the F hose off of the carb. This is the same hose that goes into the filter up there. We're going to see if we can pull it through and replace it with new fuel line. Alright, this one has a little bit of a joint towards the end of it, so we're going to separate these two, and we're just going to treat it like two separate hoses. Or two separate gas lines, I mean. Okay, I'm going to break this old clamp off of here and then remove it from the joint. Check and make sure the joint's clean, and then I'm not going to show me cutting the fuel line anymore because I feel like you guys have the hang of that. Alright, now this one's ready to go on the Seadoo. Okay, we got the fuel line back in the Seadoo, and it attaches down at the bottom of the carbs. I'm not going to put it on there because we're going to remove the carbs, and also I'm going to use this line to prime the fuel system later. But if you're not going to remember, you might as well just take a picture of it. And now we're going to feed the line back up to the fuel filter where it came from and cinch it onto there. Alright, here's that fuel line. And now we're just going to attach the line to the fuel filter here. Alright, we're back at the carburetors now. Since we got that fuel filter squared away, the next step is going to be rebuilding these carburetors and individually replacing all of these smaller fuel lines here. So I'm going to start by removing it here. Now we're removing this fuel line here to go replace it. I'm also going to take the carbs off right now. Okay, now I'm going to remove the carburetors here using a 6mm Allen. I decided for this video, since it's already getting pretty long, that I'm not going to include the process of me rebuilding the carburetors with the mikuni parts, because I already did a video of rebuilding them and I didn't put new parts in, I just cleaned the carburetors. But I think with the new parts, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just put them where the old parts came from. So I'm not going to include that in this video, but I will put the link to the other video in the top right corner. I do want to take a second to say that if you guys are enjoying this video and it's all helpful to you guys, subscribe and like this video. I'd really appreciate it because it helps me continue to grow the channel and keep bringing good content to you guys. Alright guys, I just finished rebuilding these carburetors and it went pretty well. I used some of that carbon choke cleaner you see in the background and some of those solvents to get into the get some of the corrosion off. The only thing I noticed during the rebuild was that the needle valve was stuck in the groove that it fits into. So I cleaned it up, and the kit didn't come with a new needle valve, so I cleaned it up and it seems to be functioning properly, but I probably should get a new needle valve for it, but I'm gonna see if it works without it for now. These guys did definitely need a rebuild though. Looking at these old parts that came out of it, like this rubber gasket here is just completely torn and battered from the ethanol and the fuel, and we got ethanol corrosion and the green goo all over this part here. And we got just this gasket's just in bad condition as well. Okay, before I install these carburetors, I'm going to put on this shorter fuel line that goes between both of them and kind of holds them together. I found that after you put the carburetors on and you try and do this fuel line, it's kind of a pain, so I'm going to do it first. Okay, I now got this fitting that connects to the outlet port on each carb, and it's all ready to go now. Alright, I got the carbs all the way on the Seadoo now, and I'm going to fit up this fitting here. Alright, now our carb setup looks complete. So now we're going to do this hose, or this fuel line here. This one was a little tough, so I had to cut the zip tie to pull it off of there. Alright, now we're going to trace this line up to the front of the ski and pull it out and get a new line in there. This line here goes around back, and it's the back left on this connector, or for this fuel line deposit here. So we're going to pull this guy, off. Just kind of grab the top of it and yank up. There we go, now it's off. So that's that same fuel line in front, so we're just gonna pull that whole thing out now. Alright, we got this black one cut to length with the longest strand here, so now I'm gonna put the zip ties on it and then we're gonna reinstall it. Alright, so we ran that line through to the back, and now we're gonna plug it in up here. Alright, so I loosened that clamp a little bit so we could rotate this assembly here to make it easier to put it on. And now we're gonna put that hose on to that back spot where we got it. It's really hard to film this, so I'm just gonna do my best to get you guys a good shot. But we're rotating it around, and now we're gonna put it on. Alright, so we got 2 of the 4 black hoses that go on there. They're on now, so we're gonna cinch up those zip ties and cut them. Alright, there we go. We got them cinched up and cut off. Alright, now we're connecting the return line back at the carburetors, and that's pretty much everything we need to do up here except priming the fuel lines. Okay, this is one of the original lines. This is the reserve line that connects into our fuel selector switch, and it comes from this group of the 4 hoses here on that connector. Alright, this here is the reserve line, and we're gonna go ahead and pull it off. Just be careful of the electrical around it. There we go, it came off pretty easy. Now we got our reserve line. Alright, we now got the reserve line all switched out, and we're now putting it onto the Seadoo. These ones can be tough because you have to reach back in there pretty far, but just wiggle them around and you should be fine. Now we're attaching the reserve line up onto the fuel selector port here. Okay, now we're taking our main fuel line that we replaced earlier on, and it's gonna go into the other top slot on the fuel selector up here. This is a hard one to get on, especially to put the zip tie on, but just be patient and you'll get it done. Okay, this is an air drainage hose here that fits into this clamp, but I'm gonna remove it anyways because I have extra fuel line, so I might as well just replace it all so it looks better. Alright, we slid that connector back. Now we're just gonna pull this. Alright, now that we got this line off of there, we can remove it from the fuel tank. Okay, we got the drainage line replaced, and now we're just sliding it onto the connector here. Now we're just fitting it back onto that T-fitting. Then we cut the ties off the fuel filter here. And now we're gonna put the fuel filter back where it goes. Alright, now we got that fuel filter tied down all the way. And then we're just gonna attach our final line here, which is our out from our fuel selector. It's really hard to get a good shot of this, but we're putting that outlet line onto the bottom nipple of the fuel selector right now. Alright, all we got left is these two air breather lines here, so I'm gonna replace these. I'm just not gonna do it on camera because you guys got the hang of it, but now we're gonna go up front, or go back to the carburetors and prime the fuel system and then see if we can fire up. Alright, how we prime the fuel system is we take the hose that comes from the fuel filter and fits into the bottom of the carb here, and we're gonna take a suction. The suction thing I got from Napa Auto Parts, or you can just use like a vacuum cleaner, but I'm gonna you just hold the ends together with one hand, make sure they're sealed, and then you pull and it'll start to suck, and then eventually you'll suck fuel through the line. Alright, now that we got fuel, we're gonna hook up this line and zip tie it up. Alright, you can take pre-mix some fuel here with some Seadoo 2-stroke oil at a 40:1 ratio. I'm going to pour a little bit into the carbs, and this will help prime the system too, because the carbs don't necessarily have fuel yet. So just a little bit to help with that initial startup and start to get that suction going. Alright, now I'm going to start it up. Alright, thank you guys for watching. If this video was a help to you guys, go ahead and like it and subscribe. It really helps us keep coming these videos your way. We also have a lot of other Seadoo videos on the channel and are doing a build series on a Seadoo XP here soon. So if you guys want to check that out, subscribe to the channel. And we got this one running today by replacing the fuel system. So good stuff. Thank you guys.